Alright guys, welcome back to Recreational Sniper. Tonight we're going into part 2 of bullet and ammunition selection, as well as we're going to get into a little more detail on the reasons why I set this rifle up this way. Okay, so starting with the muzzle brake. The main purpose of this is obviously to reduce recoil. But you may be asking, why put such an aggressive muzzle brake on a rifle that shoots a cartridge that has very little recoil? Well, we want to minimize muzzle movement and jump as much as possible for precision use. So that's the reason why we added the muzzle brake. Is even though it is a very light recoiling rifle, it still has recoil. It is not a non-recoiling rifle. Okay, so there is still some recoil in this rifle system. The second part of that is it will actually kind of change the barrel harmonics a little bit. And the idea is that adding a little bit of weight to the end of the barrel will kind of tame the harmonics down, make them more consistent, and potentially produce tighter groups. And that is the main purpose of this channel, really, is to produce really tight small groups, really accurate precision shooting. So reducing the recoil as much as possible, even though it has virtually not that much recoil. It still has recoil, but it's not like you would think. Most people would never consider putting a muzzle brake on a 5.56 because there's really no reason to. It doesn't hurt, it doesn't kick. Really young, smaller kids can shoot them comfortably and not have any issues with them. But just for the purpose of getting it to stay as still as possible when you fire the cartridge, and then being able to, and that kind of adds to the thing, if it's really still and it really doesn't move when you shoot it, you can actually pick up more in your scope. When you're looking through the scope, you can actually see more of what's going on. You can pick up the back of that bullet as it's flying through the air. You can see where it's impacting in the dirt, and it's a lot easier to stay on target or get back on target if you have to. But ideally you won't have to get back on target because it'll just be there because it's not moving much at all. So on from that, I know there's some people wondering why I decided to do a 20 MOA scope rail and a 20 MOA one-piece mount on top, in conjunction with each other, multiplying each other, complementing each other, and giving me basically an additional 40 minutes of angle before I actually even start adjusting the elevation turret. So the reason why is because, as we kind of got into in the previous video, is the long range potential of the 5.56. A lot of people really don't think of it as an actual long range cartridge, but with the right projectile and the right loading, it definitely can go 1,000 yards and even further. And when you're really talking about further than 1,000, 1,200, 1,300 yards, because it is a light bullet and it slows down really quick, you're going to need more elevation adjustment to get it out that much further. So some of those rounds we talked about would get us over 1,300 yards and still be above supersonic speed. So we're not passing through that transonic zone quite yet. And the bullet is still very stable and can still be very accurate. Now, again, this is for target shooting purposes. If we can't think about this in terms of like tactical use or hunting use or whatever, because at that range, at that distance, um, there's just not enough energy left in that bullet to really be considered effective. Is it possible that it will kill that far away? Absolutely. But it's just not going to be reliably effective enough at that range. We're talking it may only have 200 foot-pounds of energy left at 1,300 yards, but it's still accurate that far out, and that's what we're worried about, is the accuracy potential that it has at that range. Okay. Another thing is the use of VMAX bullets, or varmint bullets in general. These tend to be really lightweight, low grain bullets that are traveling very, very fast and produce really spectacular wound channels at close range. And so, with that being said, in my opinion, I think there is a tactical application that, that could be used, that varmint bullets could be used in. If you're in a situation like a SWAT sniper team or something, if you're in a situation where you had to shoot into a crowded area and you were worried about over penetration, varmint type bullets may be something to consider, because they don't penetrate very deep, but they cause really violent, really drastic, and really lethal wound channels, if you're in a kind of a close range area. And if you look at the average distance that a SWAT sniper shoots, they're actually pretty close range. They're like 80 yards or less on average. 80 yards is a really long shot for one of those guys. So this is kind of that type of deal. This is kind of that type of mentality and that type of setup, is that we can get a really nice high-powered clear scope and shoot a really light bullet that's traveling really, really fast, and we can place it in a very, very precise spot on a target, and reliably and effectively every time. And in that situation, that may be something to consider, and I'm sure that they do consider that type of thing. They do consider that as a thought process. Also, going back towards the long range stuff, because that's really what I'm geared towards, and the reason why this is all set up this way, with the muzzle brake and then the 40 minutes of angle with the scope mount and the scope base, and then having the Arken SH4 Gen 2, which is kind of a higher powered scope for a 5.56. You don't really typically see people running 6 to 24 power scopes on 5.56 rifles. But if I was running the Alco 77 grain rebated boat tail, like I said, it gives me a supersonic range over 1,300 yards, almost 1,400 yards. So with that being said, being able to shoot that far is great, but being able to see the impact is something that's going to be really difficult. So you're going to need that higher power scope. You're going to need to be able to see that. And also, one of the other things about having a higher powered scope is when you really crank up the magnification on it, you can actually really start to see the mirage waves, and that can really help if you know how to read mirage, which I'm not an expert on it. I'm still learning how to do it. I'm not very good at it, I will admit, but I'm starting to learn how to read mirage as we go and shoot further and further out. And being able to read that mirage, you're going to have a higher magnification scope, But also, you want to have the ability to kind of dial it back so that you're not seeing all that. It's great to be able to zoom it in and focus on it and see, okay, you can be able to see which way the mirage waves are bending and how they're bending, and you can kind of, as your experience gets better, you can kind of guess how much wind there is at that range and how much your bullet's going to drift by. But being able to dial it back from that and then kind of clear up all that is a really cool thing to be able to do. So that's kind of the reason for this type of scope setup. With all that being said, tomorrow we're actually going to go do some testing. Today I went out and I attempted to find some typical more long range 5.56 and 223 ammunition. The minimum being 62 grain FMJ, and then I was actually able to find a 77 grain OTM, the Sierra Match Kings that I was talking about, that are tactically useful for their accuracy potential at longer distances. So I've got 3 different types of ammo we're going to test. We're going to start with this Hornady Black 62 grain FMJ. Alright, so on the box, this is the stats for these 3 different boxes of ammo. This is what I've got. The Hornady Black 62 grain FMJ this is 5.56 NATO, and there is a slight difference between 5.56 NATO and 223 Remington, but it's really a chamber dimensional difference. As far as the loaded ammunition, there's not much of a difference at all. Some people argue that the 5.56 is loaded hotter than the 223, and that it's a higher pressure, but the reality is that they test the pressures differently, and they are actually, if you test them the same, they are pretty much identical in pressure and velocity and that sort of thing. So with that being said, the Hornady Black, we're looking at, box says 3,100 feet per second, G1 of 274, sectional density of 177. So I run that in my ballistic calculator. The one that I really like to use if I've got the access of a computer or laptop or something and the internet, I really like to use JBM Ballistics, because you can input a lot more specific data into that software than you can the easy mobile apps that we all like to use these days, the easy quick mobile apps. So getting the more precise your data and information goes into that calculator, the more precise your firing solution is going to come out of that calculator. So it's kind of that thing, you put crap into it, you're going to get crap out of it. If you put something really good into it, you're going to get something really good out of it. So with that being said, the Hornady Black 62 grain FMJ will get supersonic to 830 yards. We'll have 500 foot-pounds of energy to 410 yards, and 1,000 foot-pounds of energy to about 120 yards. The next round that we are going to test is the Frontier cartridge 68 grain boat tail hollow point match. This is actually 223 Remington now, but that's just the difference between a military cartridge and civilian, basically, I guess. There's not enough difference between them, to be honest, to really argue the point that one's better than the other or one's faster than the other. And I can go on and on about that, but this 68 grain boat tail hollow point match bullet is actually made by Hornady. The box says 2,960 feet per second. The G1 ballistic coefficient is 355, and the sectional density is 194. It'll give us a supersonic range to 1,020 yards, 500 foot-pounds to 520 yards, 1,000 foot-pounds to 160 yards. So that's getting on out there, that's getting on out there. The next one we have is the Sig Sauer Elite Performance Ammunition, and this is a 77 grain Sierra Match King OTM, open tip match bullet. These aren't loaded as hot as these two. These are actually, according to the box, they're kind of loaded a little down. They're showing 2,750 feet per second, a G1 ballistic coefficient of 362 and a sectional density of 219. So with that being said, run it through the calculator. It'll give us a supersonic range of 950 yards, 500 foot-pounds of energy to 500 yards, and 1,000 foot-pounds of energy to 140 yards. Now, we're going to see how all these play out, actually shooting them through this rifle. None of these rounds have been ever shot through or chronographed through this rifle. So we're going to see exactly what happens tomorrow. We're going to record the velocities, and then we're going to recalculate and show how far, with the ballistic calculator, these will actually go out of this particular rifle setup. Because what's printed on the box is almost never accurate for any rifle system. You can read the box all you want and put it in your rifle and shoot it and whatever, but if, it's just never going to be right. The velocity is never going to be the same. You're not going to be able to say that, hey, this runs 2,960 feet per second. I'm not going to be able to put it into this rifle and it's going to run exactly 2,960 feet per second. If I were to put it in a 20-inch rifle or a 24-inch rifle, it's not going to run that speed. It's going to be different. It could be faster, it could be slower. And that's one of the things with ammunition that a lot of people don't really understand is this ammunition, the printed velocities on there, muzzle velocities, come out of the barrels that those companies used and those companies tested. They are not testing your barrel. So your barrel and your rifle are going to be different from what that says. So it's really important that you actually test. If you're really planning on using this ammunition at long range, further than a couple hundred yards, more than 200 or 300 yards, you really need to know exactly how fast it's going from your rifle. That would be really important to know. So owning a chronograph is one of those things that even if you're not a reloader, if you just are a hunter, it's going to be an extremely useful tool to have, is having a chronograph on your own. So tomorrow we're going to put these to the test. I've got an extra box of the Hornady Black, and I've got an extra box of the Frontier Hollow Point bow tails. I only bought one box of this SIG ammunition because, well, it's $30 for 20 rounds, so it's like $1.50 a round. The rest of these are like 75-80 cents a round, but I wanted to buy more of that just to see how it goes. But this is just for testing purposes. We're going to zero the rifle with the 62 grain FMJs because I got a couple boxes of that, and then we'll put the others to the test up against those. We're going to look for consistency and velocity. We're going to look for accuracy. We're going to look for how tight the groups are. We're going to look for the difference in shift vertically on the target, changing from one bullet to the next. So we're going to test, and we're going to shoot groups with each one of them. We're going to shoot at least 2 5-shot groups with each one of these. Hopefully 3 5-shot groups or more with each one. We'll just see how it goes. It's going to be tomorrow afternoon, so depending on how much time and daylight we have will depend on how much shooting and testing we'll get to do, and if the range is really busy or not will depend on how much I get to film and get to show you guys without just having to talk about it after the fact. Hopefully it's dead and we can do a nice video and really break down what's going on. So with that being said, I hope you guys really stay with me and stay tuned, and we'll see you next time in the next video. Thanks for watching. Recreational Sniper out.